Let me tell you something. I wasn't always this quiet woman who drinks her tea alone and watches the birds from a second-story apartment window. I used to be the center of a home, the one who made pancakes every Sunday, who ironed shirts before interviews, who remembered everyone's doctor's appointments and birthdays. But somewhere along the way, I became someone whose phone stopped ringing, whose opinion stopped mattering, and whose love started feeling like a one-sided contract. This isn't just a sad story. It's a revenge story, though not the kind where people scream or break things. This is the quiet kind, the kind where someone wakes up one morning and finally says, "No more." My name is Clara Stone. I'm 70 years old, a widow of 9 years, and a retired senior accountant. My husband Daniel passed away quietly in his sleep, a peaceful end to a hard-working life. He left me a little pension, a modest house in Plano, Texas, and a lifetime of memories I still dust around every week, as if they could come alive if I just keep them clean enough. For a while after Daniel died, the house felt too big, too quiet. The laughter was gone. No more nightly news debates over dinner or him asking me where I'd put the TV remote when it was in his hand the whole time. I kept waiting for someone to need me. And when my daughter Charlotte mentioned they were struggling to afford a home in a good school district, I saw an opening, an invitation, not just into their mortgage, but maybe back into their lives. Charlotte was always bright, determined, a little sharp around the edges. She married Ethan, a man who smiled with his teeth, but never his eyes. They'd been renting in the outskirts of Dallas, and now they had Ben, my first and only grandson. They dreamed of a bigger place, closer to town, with better schools, a backyard. But dreams, as they said, needed money. So one afternoon, over lukewarm takeout and polite laughter, Charlotte mentioned they found the perfect townhouse, but the down payment was too high. I knew what was coming before she asked. Ethan tried to act like it wasn't a big deal. "We'll pay you back, Clara. Of course we will." But I wasn't looking for repayment. I was looking for family. The house was a new build. White brick, 2 stories, open concept kitchen, even a little deck for grilling. It had 4 bedrooms, though they only needed 3. "One can be for guests, or you, Mom, if you ever stay overnight," Charlotte had said casually. And just like that, the idea of belonging was dangled in front of me like a ribbon on a Christmas gift. I sold my home, the place where Daniel and I spent 34 years raising our daughter, paying off loans, fixing sinks ourselves. I took the $180,000 from the sale, $80,000 for the down payment, and the rest in scheduled monthly transfers of $2,200 to help cover the mortgage for 3 years. The bank required a co-signer, and I agreed to put my name on the deed as part owner, only until we get requalified, Ethan promised. 6 months, tops. I moved into a rental apartment just down the road, a small 2-bedroom place with no charm, no garden, and no creaky floorboards to warn you someone was coming down the hall. But it was close. Close to Ben, close to Charlotte, close enough to walk if they ever needed me or wanted me. The first few months were filled with gratitude. Dinners, photos, Ben's drawings on my fridge. Charlotte would call with updates, and Ethan even helped set up my Wi-Fi. "You're part of the reason we're here," she'd say, smiling, and I believed her. I remember one night standing in the kitchen of their new home, helping Charlotte set out plates for dinner. Ben was crawling between our legs, laughing. Ethan poured wine. The lights were soft, the music low. Charlotte leaned over and whispered, "Thank you for making this possible, Mom." That moment stayed with me, but like steam rising off a dish too quickly, it faded. Calls slowed, visits shortened. The spare bedroom never had a pillowcase on it. I started to ask myself, had I given them a house, or had I bought my way into one? Daniel would have warned me. He always said, "Don't give to be needed, give to be kind." But I didn't just want to be kind. I wanted to be seen again, to be included. I thought helping them build a home would make me part of it. It's strange how one decision, well-meaning, full of love, can make you disappear faster than anything else. I traded my home for a seat at their table, and what I didn't realize at the time was that seat was always conditional. That's how this began. before the party, before the words, before the quiet decision that changed everything. And I was still Clara, mother, grandmother, giver, but something was already shifting under the surface, like a pressure building behind the dam of my patience. I just didn't know yet that the flood was coming. For a while, I convinced myself things were just as they should be. I was the mother who had helped her daughter build a future, and that meant something, didn't it? There were Sunday dinners, texts with pictures of Ben holding up macaroni crafts, little hugs in the driveway when I dropped off some groceries they said they didn't need, but always accepted. It felt like family, or enough of it to get by. Charlotte and Ethan kept saying they'd help me settle in, maybe even remodel the spare bedroom in their townhouse for when I wanted to stay over. "We'll make it cozy," Charlotte had promised, standing beside the kitchen island I helped pay for. "We'll put up blackout curtains and get a good mattress. You'll have your own space." But months passed and nothing changed. No room was prepared, no curtains, no mattress. Instead, they'd glance at each other when I brought it up, as if I'd made a strange suggestion. "Maybe after the holidays," Charlotte would say, though no one ever asked me to stay for those either. Still, I kept the rhythm going. I called every week. I sent little care packages, Ben's favorite fruit snacks, a sweater I found on sale that I thought Charlotte might like, a jar of the marinara sauce Ethan once said reminded him of his mother's cooking. I was never trying to buy their love. I was just trying to stay connected. They weren't unkind, not at first, just increasingly distracted. Busy. Always busy. There was always some reason why they couldn't visit or why I didn't need to come by. Charlotte's job at the tech startup had ramped up. Ethan had started working weekends on a new project. Ben was enrolled in a play-based pre-K enrichment program and had his hands full with finger painting and foam letter spelling. "We're just in a busy season," Charlotte would say. "You understand, right?" And of course, I'd nod. I always nodded. I remember once I showed up with homemade cookies for Ben. It was a Wednesday, just past 4 in the afternoon. I'd texted ahead, but no one responded. Still, I figured I'd just drop them off on the porch. As I walked up, I could hear laughter from the backyard. Through the slats of the fence, I saw a few people gathered, Ethan with a drink in hand, Charlotte chatting with another mom, kids running across the lawn, a casual little get-together. I waited, holding the cookie tin, thinking maybe someone would notice me, but no one came to the front door. I stood there for maybe 3 minutes, and then I turned around, walked back to my car, and drove home in silence. You ever had that moment where you show up with your heart in your hands and nobody even notices? If you've ever stood outside someone's life while they laughed inside without you, tell me, did you keep knocking or did you finally walk away? I'd really like to know because I kept knocking longer than I should have. One evening, Charlotte called, not to ask how I was doing, but to gently remind me that next month's mortgage transfer needed to happen a little earlier. "We've got some overlapping expenses," she said, "and Ethan's bonus is delayed." She said it like I was part of their budget, like I was an auto draft with a smile. "Of course," I told her. I moved the money 2 days early. I always did. I never missed a month. Sometimes I'd calculate it in my head, like an old habit from my accounting days. $2,200 a month for 3 years. That's $79,200, not counting the $80,000 down payment. But that wasn't the point, was it? It wasn't about the money. It was about what the money was supposed to mean. It was supposed to mean I belonged. I tried telling myself that they were just stressed, young parents with careers. I tried not to compare it to the way Daniel and I raised Charlotte, how we never missed a school play, how we drove 2 hours just to see her speech team competition. I told myself not to take it personally, but something inside me had already started to change. It started the day I got a message from a neighbor, one of Charlotte's old high school friends, Lindsay, who still lived in town. "Saw Ben at the zoo today," she texted. "He's gotten so big." I stared at the screen. The zoo? Charlotte had told me Ben was home with a cold. "Better not risk your health, Mom," she said. I didn't respond to Lindsay. I didn't confront Charlotte. I just sat with that lie. Let it settle. Let it echo. Because once you start noticing the lies, you begin to realize they've always been there. I remember folding laundry that night and thinking, they invite me over when it's convenient. They accept my money because it makes their lives easier. But my presence, my actual self, that part, they don't seem to want very much. The next Sunday, we had lunch at their place. Ben sat beside me, quiet, coloring. Charlotte scrolled her phone. Ethan kept checking his watch. I brought up the idea of taking Ben to the park next weekend, just the two of us. Ethan said, he's got soccer. Charlotte added, and we're trying to keep his weekends structured. Then she looked at me, smiled, and said, but thanks for offering, Mom. Thanks for offering. Like I'd volunteered for some small favor they didn't need. I went home and sat in my kitchen, staring at the little cactus plant Ben had given me last year. The soil was dry and the leaves were curling in, neglected, forgotten. And for the first time since I handed them that down payment, I thought to myself, maybe this wasn't a gift. Maybe it was a transaction. And maybe I'd paid more than they ever planned to return. It started small. That's the thing they never tell you about becoming invisible. You don't vanish all at once. It happens gradually. 1 minute, you're being asked what color backsplash they should pick for the kitchen, and the next, you're sitting alone on your birthday waiting for a call that never comes. At first, I told myself they were just adjusting to new routines. New house, new jobs, a growing child. Of course they were busy. Life moves fast when you're in the middle of it. I remembered those days, packing lunches with one hand while flipping through bills with the other. You barely had time to breathe, let alone check in with your mother. But the difference was, I always checked in with mine, always made time. No matter how tired I was, how hectic the week had been, I picked up the phone or showed up with soup when she had a cold. Because that's what we do, or at least what I thought we did. One Saturday in early spring, I stopped by their house with a small bag of toys for Ben. I'd found a used set of wooden trains at a garage sale, still in perfect condition. Ben loved trains. I thought he'd be excited. I rang the bell, waited, no answer. I knocked, still nothing. I heard laughter in the backyard, music playing, so I peeked around the side gate, just a glance. There they were, Charlotte, Ethan, and a few couples I didn't recognize. A small gathering, nothing big, balloons tied to a lawn chair, hot dogs on the grill, kids chasing bubbles. No one had told me about a get-together. I wasn't invited, and yet there they were, hosting, smiling, while I stood there with a plastic bag full of toys, wondering why my daughter didn't think I belonged. I left the bag on the porch, drove home in silence, didn't say a word about it afterward. That was the day I stopped bringing up plans. I stopped asking if they needed help picking up groceries, stopped offering to babysit. I'd still call sometimes, just to hear Ben's voice. But even those calls became quick, scheduled affairs. Sorry, Mom, we've got swimming class. Or, we're about to head out. Can I call you tomorrow? Tomorrow rarely came. And when I did see Ben, he started calling me Grandma Clara, like I was a character in a story, not the woman who helped build his roof, who rocked him to sleep the week his mother had strep, who used to carry baby wipes and crackers in her purse just in case he needed them. Charlotte once laughed and said, "He thinks of you like the library lady, someone nice we see once in a while." She said it like it was cute. I smiled, pretended it didn't feel like a blade across the heart. You know, there's a particular kind of grief that comes from being erased while you're still alive. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's just a slow suffocation, like someone turning down the volume on your life one notch at a time. Sometimes I'd sit in my apartment and wonder what I'd done wrong. Had I called too often, not enough? Was I too available, too hopeful? Had I made the mistake of loving them more than they loved me? There was one night late in April when I couldn't sleep. I walked around my tiny apartment barefoot on the cold tile and stared at the clock. 12:42 a.m. I opened my phone and scrolled back through old messages. Photos of Ben on Halloween, Charlotte asking me what kind of dishwasher I thought they should get, Ethan saying thanks for the generous help. Smiley faces, exclamation points, the performance of gratitude. And then, silence. 3 months, no invitations, no holidays, no room made up for me. I'd helped them into their dream life, and they had quietly closed the door behind them. At the time, I didn't have words for it. I didn't call it betrayal. I didn't call it manipulation. I just called it disappointment. That's what mothers are trained to do. Downplay their own pain. Make excuses for the people they love. But deep down, I was starting to understand the truth. I hadn't just given them money. I had given them permission to forget me. And they had. They didn't even know they'd done it. That was the hardest part. It wasn't cruelty. It was indifference, which somehow hurt worse. I still transferred the mortgage payment each month like clockwork, still sent birthday cards, still smiled when Charlotte finally remembered to text back. I kept playing the role, but a part of me had started to detach, like I was watching it all from outside my own life. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea, watching the sun go down behind the building across the street. I thought about calling Charlotte, just to say hi, and I didn't. I closed my phone. Sat there, quiet. Because what do you do when you realize you're no longer a guest in your own family? You're just an outsider, standing on the porch, holding memories no one else remembers, and worse, no one else misses. It was Ben's 5th birthday, a milestone, the kind of day grandparents circle on their calendars months in advance. I remember picking out a little red sweater for him at Kohl's and baking the same carrot cake I made for Charlotte every year when she was little. It was my way of staying part of the tradition, if not the whole, then at least a piece. The invitation came in a group text. No personal call, no, "Hey Mom, we really want you there." Just a message with a pastel graphic that read, "Ben's Backyard Birthday Bash, Saturday at 3 p.m., sent to what looked like a dozen numbers. Still, I told myself, it's something, and something was better than nothing. That morning, I took extra care getting dressed, picked a pale blue blouse Daniel once said brought out my eyes. I wrapped the cake gently, packed the gift, and added a little hand-drawn card with a train on it, because Ben still loved trains. I arrived at 2:50, early but not awkwardly so. I pulled into the driveway and saw the balloons first, green, blue, and silver, tied to the mailbox. Music floated out from the backyard, laughter, shouts, the smell of grilled hot dogs. I smiled. This was what I had hoped for. As I walked up the path, cake in hand, Ethan stepped around from the side gate. He was holding a can of soda, wearing aviator sunglasses and a too-tight polo. He didn't smile when he saw me. Instead, he raised one eyebrow and said flat and clear, "You weren't invited." I thought I'd misheard. "Excuse me?" He didn't even blink. Charlotte said it was just for close family and Ben's school friends. I just stood there, on the front walk, in the heat, with a cake sweating in its container and my fingers wrapped around a gift I suddenly didn't know what to do with. For a moment, I thought maybe it was a joke. Maybe there was a camera somewhere and everyone would yell, "Surprise, I'm the..." and I'd laugh, and this horrible sinking feeling would vanish. But Ethan just stood there, blocking the path like a bouncer at a club I never applied to. I looked past him. I could see the bounce house, a dozen people milling around. Charlotte laughing with another woman, drink in hand. She didn't look over. I cleared my throat. "I'm Ben's grandmother." He shrugged. "It's not my call. Charlotte made the guest list." That was it. No apology, no step aside, no warmth. Just a gate slammed in my face, not with wood or steel, but with silence and indifference. I stood there for a beat longer. Then I turned, walked back to the car, set the cake on the passenger seat, and drove away. I didn't cry. Not then. I didn't scream or call Charlotte or post something online or storm back through the gate. I didn't make a scene. I just left. Because in that moment, I understood something that I had been trying not to admit for over a year. I wasn't family anymore. Not to them. Not in the way that mattered. You can give someone everything. Time, money, love, and they can still decide you're disposable. They can still recategorize you as other. And what stunned me wasn't the rejection. It was how easy it seemed for them. When I got home, I set the cake in the fridge. I didn't unwrap it, didn't even take off my shoes. I sat down in the armchair by the window and stared out into the late afternoon light. And then, slowly, I whispered aloud, not to anyone in particular, maybe to Daniel's memory still lingering in the corners of this little place. I don't belong to them anymore. It felt like saying it made it real. I opened my laptop, not to distract myself, not to scroll, but to look. I logged into my bank account, scanned the monthly transfers. There they were, every payment on time, $2,200, every month, for over 2 years. No missed transfers, no questions asked. I pulled up the property records, my name still on the deed. I stared at it, quiet, and then I opened a blank document. I didn't write anything, just sat there, cursor blinking. I thought of Charlotte's first day of kindergarten, the tiny backpack, how she cried when I let go of her hand, how I told her, "You're safe, you're loved, you're never alone." What a thing to say, what a lie that turned out to be. Somewhere in the neighborhood, I heard kids shouting, playing, a bounce house maybe, a party I hadn't been welcome at. I closed the laptop. I looked at the wrapped gift still sitting in my bag. Then I walked over to the trash and dropped it in. For the first time in months, I didn't feel uncertain or confused. I felt clear. They had drawn the line. And finally, I saw it. And I wasn't going to stand on the wrong side of it anymore. The Monday after the party, I woke up earlier than usual. No alarm, just that kind of wakefulness that comes when your heart is done, pretending it isn't broken. The sunlight spilled across the floor in my tiny kitchen. I brewed coffee, not because I needed it, but because I needed something to hold, something warm, something that reminded me I still existed in a world where people made choices, and that I was about to make one of mine. I didn't call Charlotte. I didn't text. I didn't say a word. Instead, I pulled out the brown folder where I kept all the house documents. The original mortgage agreement, the deed, the automatic payment schedule. All of it. I laid it out on my small table like a quiet funeral for my own generosity. And that's when I made the decision. I wasn't going to fund their lives anymore. Not after what Ethan said, not after watching my daughter pretend I wasn't standing 10 feet from her, not after being shut out of a child's birthday party I helped make possible. I opened my laptop, logged into my bank, and did something I never thought I'd do. I canceled the auto payment, no announcement, no letter, no drama, just one quiet click. After that, I called my lawyer. He was surprised to hear from me. Kind voice, firm handshake kind of man who'd helped Daniel and me with our wills back when Ben was still in diapers. I told him everything. The transfer of ownership, the deed, the financial arrangements, the verbal agreements that were never honored, the way I had been shut out of a family I had built. He didn't say much at first, just listened. Then he said, "Do you want to remove your name from the deed?" I said no. I wanted it there. I wanted a record, a presence. Then I suggest we prepare a formal letter, come on, he said, informing them you are no longer continuing the mortgage support. You are under no obligation. You've done more than enough. I nodded. Can you make it official but not angry? He smiled. We can do firm, without fire. It was the perfect phrase. Firm without fire, because that's who I was becoming again. Not a doormat, not a ghost, but someone who made calm decisions in the face of pain. For days, I didn't hear from Charlotte. I imagined her opening the bank app, seeing the missing payment, and assuming it was a glitch. I imagined Ethan pacing, trying to decide whether to call me or to pretend they didn't notice. They didn't reach out. Not at first. That silence was its own kind of confirmation. They hadn't just pushed me out emotionally, they had done the math. Counted on me to never change. Banked on my loyalty. And that's the part that hurt most, not the rejection, but the assumption I'd just keep taking it. Around the same time, I started doing little things differently. I stopped checking their social media, stopped asking my neighbors if they'd seen Ben, stopped buying things just in case Charlotte might like them. Instead, I started taking walks. I called an old friend from college, Betty, who'd moved to Austin and always said I should visit. I made an appointment at the hair salon and let the stylist talk me into chopping off 3 inches and adding soft layers. "Looks like someone's starting fresh," she said. I smiled. Something like that. It felt like reclaiming a part of myself I had left behind in the blueprint of their house. Then came the email. From Charlotte, subject line, "Payment?" Just one line. "Hey Mom, saw that the mortgage didn't go through this month. Is everything okay?" I stared at it. "No. How are you?" "No. Sorry about the party." "No. We miss you." "Just payment?" And with that, something clicked into place. I didn't owe her an explanation, so I didn't give one. I simply replied, "I've decided to stop contributing. The 3 years of support we agreed on are almost up. I wish you and Ethan well moving forward." That was it. I hit send. No signature, no warmth, no justification. I sat back in my chair and looked out the window. The same second-story view, but something felt different now. Lighter, like I'd just returned something that had been borrowed too long. That evening, I baked a small carrot cake for myself, just 1 layer, no decorations. I lit a candle, not for a birthday, just for peace, and cut a slice. I ate it in silence. Not sad, not angry, just still. I'd always thought a revenge story had to be loud, explosive. But I was learning something new. The quietest actions often echo the loudest. And mine had only just begun. 2 weeks passed. No calls, no emails, no apology. But I didn't expect one anymore. It's strange how clarity doesn't arrive like thunder. It comes like a subtle change in air pressure. You notice you're breathing easier, but you can't pinpoint when it started. That's how it felt. The money stopped flowing, and so did my self-doubt. Then came the knock. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was trimming my little front porch fern when I saw Charlotte's car pull up. She stepped out with sunglasses on her head, holding a grocery bag in one hand and a strained smile on her face. "Hi, Mom," she said, like we hadn't gone radio silent for weeks. I stood up, brushing off my hands. "Charlotte, I brought you some of that lemon tea you like, and those little oat biscuits." The kind gestures used to soften me once. Now they just made me curious. "Thank you," I said, taking the bag politely. "Would you like to come in?" She hesitated. "Sure." Inside, she wandered like a guest, even though this used to be her childhood home. Her eyes drifted over the small space, the hand-me-down love seat, the needlepoint I stitched decades ago, Daniel's old reading lamp I'd kept. She sat. "So, the payments. I just wanted to talk about it. I wasn't sure if something happened or if maybe you forgot." I smiled, not cruelly, just enough. "I didn't forget, Charlotte." I stopped. She blinked. "Stopped?" "I'd always planned to support you for 3 years. It's been almost 3. I decided that was enough. But you didn't say anything." "You didn't either," I said softly. "Not after the party." Charlotte flushed. "Ethan didn't mean—" "Charlotte," I said, "please don't explain him to me. I wasn't there for Ethan. I was there for Ben. And for you." She looked down at her hands. There was a time I would have leapt into that silence, offered her comfort, told her I understood, but not anymore. This time I let it sit. She spoke again. "I didn't think it mattered. You always helped. You always showed up." "Exactly. I always did, and that was the problem." "I know," I said, "but I've learned something. Helping isn't the same as being valued. I mistook being useful for being loved." Charlotte's eyes welled, but no tears fell. I didn't know how far it had gone. "You didn't want to know," I said. She didn't argue. We sat there for a long moment, the kind of silence where something ends quietly inside a person and something else begins. Before she left, she looked at me and said, "Ben's been asking about you." I nodded. "I miss him. We could have you over sometime, maybe next weekend." I smiled again. "Maybe." She left it there. Didn't push. After she walked out, I placed the tea in the cupboard, the oat biscuits on the shelf. Then I sat down by the window, tea in hand, and watched the sun hit the side of my apartment building just right. It was a soft golden, warm in a way that reminded me of Daniel's laugh. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel left out. I felt whole. If you've ever been forgotten by someone you loved, your child, your spouse, a friend, and then finally stopped begging to be seen, tell me, was your peace quiet like mine, or did it roar through you all at once? I'd love to hear how your silence turned into strength, because mine was slow, but it was permanent. That Sunday, I went to the farmer's market alone. I bought a bouquet of sunflowers and a small lemon tart. A young woman at a vendor stand told me she liked my earrings. I told her I liked her smile. We laughed. On the way home, I passed a house with a porch swing. A little boy sat on it, rocking gently, humming to himself. He reminded me of Ben, and for the first time, the ache didn't sting. It was just memory. Charlotte didn't follow up about the visit. Maybe she needed time. Maybe she realized that earning someone back takes more than effort. It takes truth. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I had given enough, loved enough, and finally, I had chosen myself. Not to punish, not to prove, but to heal. And that, to me, was the real ending. No door slammed, no name erased, just a mother, quietly reclaiming her life one choice at a time. It was around week 4 that the cracks began to show. At first, I didn't notice. I was too focused on rebuilding my quiet life, cleaning out old drawers, cooking meals just for myself, walking down to the local bookstore to lose an afternoon. There was peace in the stillness, peace I hadn't known in years. But then my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Minutes later, a text arrived from Charlotte. "Hey, can we talk?" Short, no emoji, no request for money. That alone was new. I called her back. She picked up on the first ring. "Mom," her voice was tight, controlled. I waited. "We're behind on the mortgage," she said. "I didn't realize how much that money helped until it stopped." I didn't say anything. She kept going. "Ethan and I were arguing. A lot. He says I should have handled things differently, that I let things go too far with you." There was no apology, but there was something under there, something breaking. "We're looking at refinancing. We might have to sell." That caught me off guard. The house? The one I helped build? The one where I imagined Ben growing up, where I thought maybe one day they'd carve a small room for me near the garden? It was their problem now, not mine. "I'm sorry you're going through this," I said gently. "I really am. But Charlotte, I warned you." Quietly, over and over. "I know," she whispered. "I just didn't think." She didn't finish. The silence said the rest. I knew what she didn't want to say out loud. She didn't think I'd walk away. She didn't think I'd choose myself. She thought I'd keep giving because that's what I always did. I didn't gloat. I didn't sigh in relief. I just listened. And when she hung up, I sat there for a long while, my tea going cold in my hand, realizing that sometimes justice doesn't look like revenge. Sometimes it looks like a mirror. And right now, Charlotte was looking into hers. The next week, I saw Ethan's car in my apartment complex parking lot. It took me a second to place it. That glossy navy SUV he always parked diagonally in their driveway. Now it was wedged between a used Honda and a rusted-out pickup. I spotted him in the leasing office when I went to collect my mail. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did and pretended not to. Either way, I didn't wave. They were downsizing. Maybe just temporarily. Maybe permanently. But they were feeling the weight now. I never wanted them to suffer. That was never the point. But part of me, if I'm being honest, part of me felt a quiet validation. Not because they were struggling, but because life had finally tapped them on the shoulder and said, "You can't build a foundation on someone else's sacrifice forever." Ben called me later that afternoon. "Grandma?" he asked, his voice soft. "Why don't you come over anymore?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I've been taking care of myself, sweetheart. But I miss you." "Mommy said you were busy." I smiled sadly. Well, sometimes even grandmas need to rest. Can I come to your house? That one broke me a little. We'll make that happen soon, I told him. I'll have cookies ready. When I hung up, I sat back and let the moment settle. My daughter's world was shifting. Slowly, not catastrophically, but shifting all the same. And me? For once, I wasn't the safety net. I wasn't the fix. I wasn't the backup plan. I was just me. And it was enough. If you've ever stepped away from people you once would have bled for and watched them realize what they lost too late, how did you handle that silence? Did it hurt? Or did it feel like the start of something new? I'd love to know, because for me, it's not triumph. It's not bitterness. It's peace. Pure and earned. And for the first time in years, I knew this. My absence finally had weight, and they were learning what it cost to lose it. A week later, something came in the mail that made me sit down before I even opened it. It was a plain white envelope, my name written in a wobbly, careful print. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Ben's. I opened it slowly, like I was afraid it might vanish. Inside was a folded piece of ruled notebook paper, the kind you see in a second grader's backpack, decorated with little rocket ships and stars along the border. He'd written in pencil, letters large and crooked. Dear Grandma Clara, I miss you. I don't know why you didn't come to my party. Mommy said you were busy, but I don't think you forgot. I saved you a balloon. It popped. But I still have cake and a drawing I made for you. Can I bring it to your house? Love, Binapas. I still have the trains you gave me. I made a new bridge. That last line, I made a new bridge? I don't think he even knew what that meant, not really. But to me, it was everything. I read the letter 3 times, then I set it down and just breathed. I hadn't cried since the party. Not when the payments ended, not when Charlotte looked at me with that mix of guilt and pride. But Ben's note? That was the one that cracked me. Because in the middle of all the mess, the politics, the pride, the money, this little boy still remembered love in its simplest form, and he missed me. Not the mortgage, not the gifts, just me. I wrote him back immediately. I found a blank card in the drawer, one with sunflowers on the front. I wrote, Dear Ben, thank you for your letter. It made me so happy. I miss you too, more than lemon cookies and train whistles and sunny walks put together. I would love to see your bridge, and I think we should build a new one together, out of blocks and stories and maybe peanut butter sandwiches. Tell Mommy she can bring you over whenever it works. I'll be here. Love always, Grandma Clara. I sealed it, added a small packet of sunflower seeds he could plant, and dropped it in the mailbox that afternoon. For the first time in months, I waited for a knock at the door with hope instead of dread. It came 3 days later. Charlotte was the one holding Ben's hand. He ran to me, arms flung wide, crashing into my waist like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. You got my letter, he said. I sure did. We sat on the floor with his toy trains, building a new bridge out of books and couch cushions. He showed me where the tunnel should go, how the engine made a screeching sound at the end. He laughed like nothing had ever gone wrong. Charlotte watched from the couch, quiet. She didn't interrupt. When Ben went to the bathroom, she stood and walked over. Thank you, she said. For what? For answering him, for not blaming him. I looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't see my daughter as a disappointment. I saw her as someone trying. Clumsily, late, but trying. I never blamed him, I said. He's the only one who never forgot I existed. She nodded. I did forget. I won't make excuses. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Some silences don't need to be filled. They just need to be felt. That night, after they left, I stood by the window, watching the sun drop low behind the trees. I could still hear Ben's laugh echoing in my apartment, a sound that used to live here often, a sound I never wanted to forget again. And for the first time in this whole quiet unraveling, I realized something. I wasn't alone. Not really. If you've ever been the one who kept showing up, kept loving even when it wasn't returned, then finally saw that one small soul still reaching back for you. Tell me, was that enough to rebuild something? Even if it wasn't perfect? Because for me, Ben's letter didn't fix everything, but it reminded me that I still mattered, and sometimes that's where healing really begins. After Ben's visit, something inside me softened, but something else also changed. For so long, I'd been waiting for Charlotte to remember, waiting for Ethan to acknowledge, waiting for the family I gave everything to reach back. But after that day, after Ben's little arms wrapped around me and his laughter filled my empty living room, I realized I didn't need to wait anymore. Love wasn't something I had to earn back, and peace? It wasn't something someone had to hand me. It was something I could choose. That Friday morning, I did something small but huge. I took myself out to breakfast. Just me, no appointment, no reason. I put on lipstick, real lipstick, not just balm. I wore the navy blue cardigan Daniel had always said made me look sharp, like a woman with a plan. And I walked to the local diner on the corner. The waitress greeted me with a smile. "Table for two?" "Nope," I said with a grin. "Just me today." I ordered pancakes, bacon, and real coffee. I sat by the window and watched the morning wake up, the people rushing to places I didn't need to be. I didn't scroll, I didn't check my phone. I just was. And for the first time, I liked my own company. After breakfast, I went to the community center. They had a flyer for a watercolor class, something I hadn't tried since high school. I signed up. That afternoon, I signed up for the library's Books and Brews Club, and I pulled out the sewing machine from the back of my closet and fixed the tear in my old quilt, something I'd been putting off for months. None of it was dramatic. None of it would go viral on the internet. But every stitch, every step, every quiet morning, they were mine. Have you ever done that? Walked out of someone else's shadow and realized the sun still reached you anyway? If you've ever stopped orbiting around people who ignored your light, I want to know, what did you do first just for you? Tell me below. Because for me, it was pancakes. It was thread. It was the choice to belong to myself again. Of course, not everything disappeared. There were still little pangs when I passed their street on the way to the market, or when I saw a family laughing together in the park and wondered, could we have had that? But I didn't dwell, because healing isn't pretending the wound never existed. It's knowing it doesn't control you anymore. And now, when Charlotte texted, I didn't flinch. I didn't jump. I read it when I wanted to. Sometimes I replied. Sometimes I didn't. Boundaries. Who knew they could feel so gentle? A week later, Charlotte called again. Her voice was steadier this time. She told me Ethan had moved into a friend's house for space. They were figuring things out. I listened. I didn't fix. She didn't ask for money, just my ear. And at the end of the call, she said something I never expected. "Mom, I'm proud of you." I blinked. She continued. "I don't know if I ever said it, but I see it now. You did everything for us, and when we forgot that, you didn't explode. You just stepped back. That took strength I didn't understand until I had none left. It wasn't closure, but it was something." I thanked her. Then I hung up and sat quietly for a moment, hands wrapped around my cup of chamomile. My life didn't look like it used to. There was no Sunday dinner with grandkids at my table, no big family vacations, no framed photos updated every year. But what I had now was real, a small, steady life. My name on my mailbox, my peace, earned the hard way, and my pride, finally unshaken. I knew there were more conversations to come, maybe even visits, maybe rebuilding, or maybe not. But I was no longer waiting for any of it, because I had returned to the only home I ever truly had, myself. The shift wasn't loud. It never is. But one day, you wake up and realize people are treating you differently, not because you changed how you looked, not because you raised your voice, but because you stopped chasing them. It started with Charlotte showing up unannounced on a Sunday afternoon. She brought a pot of soup, homemade, she said, from scratch. I raised an eyebrow. "What's the occasion?" She smiled sheepishly. "No occasion, I figured maybe you'd like a visit." I let her in. We sat at the kitchen table, her on the chair Daniel used to occupy every morning for 42 years. She didn't talk about Ethan, or the house, or finances. She asked about me, my art class, the book club, the lavender I was growing on the windowsill, and I realized this was the first time in years that my daughter saw me as a woman, not just as a mother who existed to solve, support, or sacrifice. And I liked it. We talked for an hour, nothing deep, just small things, real things. She even asked to see the new quilt I'd been working on. When she left, she hugged me tighter than usual. "Ben wants to stay the weekend sometime," she said before stepping out. "Would that be okay?" I nodded. "I'd like that." That night, I took out the quilt again, not to work on it, just to hold it. The patches, the needlework, each stitch now felt like part of my return to myself. The next week, I was at the grocery store, debating between two brands of yogurt, when I heard a voice behind me, "Mrs. Taylor?" I turned. It was Ethan. I blinked. He looked tired, heavier, not in weight, but in presence. The kind of tired that comes when the image of control finally breaks. "Hi," I said, cautious but not cold. He paused. I wanted to say something. I waited. He took a breath. I was wrong. About the party, about everything. That was all he said. No speech, no tears. Just that. I nodded once. "I know." He looked relieved, and also a little unsure. "I don't expect anything," he added quickly. "I just thought you should hear it." And then he walked away. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just stood there in the yogurt aisle, feeling a stillness I hadn't earned through argument, but through restraint. It turns out the world notices when you stop begging to be seen, and sometimes they start looking for you. Have you ever had someone come back? Not because you chased them, but because they finally understood your silence? Tell me if you felt that shift. When did your quiet strength finally speak louder than their pride? For me, it happened in a grocery store, between Greek vanilla and strawberry banana. That week, I was invited to Ben's school play. Charlotte sent a formal invite. "We'd love for you to be there, but no pressure, just an open door." I went. I wore a soft lavender scarf and sat in the second row. Ben spotted me and waved with both arms like I was the star of the show. When the play ended, I waited outside the gymnasium doors. Ben ran up, out of breath. "You came!" I crouched down. Of course I did. He handed me a crumpled paper flower he'd made. "For you, because you're the nicest grandma and the best train builder, and," he paused, "because you didn't forget me." My throat tightened. "I never could," I whispered. Charlotte stood nearby, watching. She didn't interrupt. She didn't need to, because for the first time in a long, long time, I was not invisible. I wasn't begging to be invited. I wasn't knocking on doors that stayed shut. I was simply seen, and I hadn't raised my voice once. The funny thing about silence is, once you stop chasing people, they begin to realize how much space you used to fill, and suddenly they start circling back. It wasn't dramatic. No grand apology dinner, no weepy confession, just small gestures. Charlotte started texting more, sometimes to check in, sometimes to share a photo of Ben doing something adorable. Painting, building, wearing a spaghetti strainer as a hat. I never initiated, but I responded when I wanted to. No more than that. She began dropping by once a week. Always with something small, a loaf of banana bread, a candle she thought I'd like, a paperback she just finished. I didn't ask questions. I didn't make her explain herself. I just let her sit at the table she used to eat cereal at every morning. Let her pour her own tea now instead of expecting me to get it for her. That was the difference now. She came as a guest. Not a daughter who felt entitled. A woman who was learning how to rebuild something she broke. And Ethan? He stayed away. Until one Sunday morning, I opened the door to find him standing there, not with flowers or gifts, but with a folder in his hand. "Hi, Mrs. Taylor," he said, quiet, respectful. "I've been talking with Charlotte. And the bank. We're getting our finances in order. We're taking over the full mortgage now. I didn't react. He held out the folder. These are copies of everything. Just so you know, it's official. You don't need to be responsible for anything anymore. I nodded. Thank you. He looked like he wanted to say more. Maybe explain himself. Maybe apologize. But I didn't need it. Some things speak for themselves. When he turned to go, I said, Ethan? He stopped. I hope you're a better husband now than you were a son-in-law. He didn't argue. He didn't deny it. He just said, I'm trying. That was enough. Later that week, I went to pick up Ben from school for the first time in a long while. Charlotte had asked gently if I was open to it. Only if you feel like it, she said. And I did. Ben ran toward me like he'd been waiting months. His backpack bounced, his sneakers untied, his cheeks pink from the afternoon sun. Grandma, he yelled. Guess what? I made the highest score in math. Well, of course you did, I smiled. You've got a genius grandma. We stopped for ice cream on the way home. Just the two of us. He told me all about school, how his new teacher loved frogs, how he didn't like the way spaghetti stuck in his teeth, how he missed the days we used to play trains. I promised we'd build a new bridge soon. He nodded like it was the most serious contract in the world. And in that moment, I thought, this is enough. I don't need their words. I don't need a scene. I have this. Have you ever had someone come back, not with fireworks, but with quiet consistency? Not because you forgave them out loud, but because your strength made them face their own reflection? If you've been there, if your absence made people realize your value, how did it feel the first time they came back, not asking for anything, just showing up differently? Tell me. I think many of us carry that moment quietly. That night, as Ben fell asleep on my old couch, arms wrapped around his stuffed dinosaur, I looked around my apartment. My small, quiet space. No pictures of the old house. No framed certificates. Just light, peace, and a shelf of books I finally had time to read. Charlotte came to pick him up just before 9. She didn't rush. She stood in the doorway, watching him sleep for a moment. Mom, she said softly, can I ask you something? I looked up. Do you think we can ever be close again? I paused, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I finally knew that my answer didn't need to be soft just to protect her feelings. We'll see, I said, not cold, not cruel, just honest. But you're welcome to keep showing up. She nodded. That was it. No guarantees, no performance, just an open door. One she'd have to knock on again if she wanted to come inside. It was Sunday morning, the kind where the light creeps in slow through the blinds and everything feels softer, like the world itself is exhaling. I made coffee, not for anyone else, just for me. Strong, hot, in the blue mug with the little chip at the handle that only I notice. I sat by the window, legs tucked under me, quilt over my knees. There was no knock at the door. No phone buzzing, just silence. But not the aching kind, the whole kind. I looked around this space. My apartment, my own space. It had no marble countertops, no garden path, no 2-car garage like the house I once paid for. But it was mine. Every book, every photo, every mug. My life wasn't big, but it fit me perfectly. Charlotte had visited twice that week. The second time, she brought fresh tulips and didn't ask for anything. We talked about nothing, weather, recipes, how Ben was obsessed with outer space now. She didn't ask to stay. She didn't hint at anything. She simply came. And she left. And I let her. It's funny, for years, I begged for that kind of connection. And now that I finally have peace, I don't cling to it. I just notice it. Like a breeze that passes through a room. Ben still called me Grandma Clara. He still left me voicemails about his school lunch and how he lost a tooth, and I still smiled every time. But I no longer needed those calls to feel whole. I had become something I didn't think I could be at 73, free, not abandoned, not erased, just free. That morning, I walked down to the market. I took the long way, through the park. I passed a young couple arguing about groceries, and I smiled. Not out of judgment, but because I remembered that version of life. The mess, the noise, the doing everything for everyone version of womanhood. And I whispered quietly to the Clara from 10 years ago, "You made it. You're not invisible. You were never invisible. They just couldn't see clearly." At the cafe, the barista greeted me by name. "Miss Clara, you want your usual?" I nodded. "Add a lemon scone today. I'm celebrating." "Oh yeah, what's the occasion?" "Just waking up, still here, still choosing myself." She laughed like it was the best thing she'd heard all week. And maybe it was. When I got home, I lit a candle. Lavender, my favorite. I sat down and pulled out my journal. Not to write about pain or loss, but to write about this new life I'd built. Not loud, not rich, not crowded, but mine. My last entry said this: "I once paid for a house I never truly belonged in. Now I live in a home that costs nothing to keep, except the decision to never go backwards." Have you ever walked away from a place or a person that made you feel small, only to discover a version of yourself that was bigger than you ever knew? Have you ever won? Not by taking something back, but by refusing to give any more of yourself away? Because if you have, then this isn't just my story. It's your revenge story too. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that lives in tea mugs, in locked doors, in soft boundaries, and in knowing when to stop knocking. So tell me, if you're here, if you've been through this kind of journey, what did you finally stop giving? And what did you finally start becoming? Because today, I am no longer waiting for an invitation. I am already home.